Steven Andress here for thelines.com, playpicks.com, joined by the Lines senior writer Mo Nawara. In this video, we are going to break down another advanced statistic in baseball, xERA. We talked about fielding independent pitching FiP in an earlier video here on our YouTube channel, so be sure to check that out, as well as the other advanced metrics that we'll be discussing to help you with your baseball betting. But in this video, we're going to talk about xERA, how it's different than FiP, how Mo applies it to his handicapping throughout the baseball season, as well as how he looks at futures with it when he's handicapping. So Mo, first question, right? What is xERA?
So it's a little bit complicated because xERA is basically xWOBA translated onto the ERA scale. So people who probably don't know about xWOBA, it's basically trying to weight individual offensive statistics and turn them into how much they help create runs. So I guess it's probably not too hard. I'm not a statistician, but I guess it's probably not too hard to flip that to the other side and turn it into.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of like casual baseball fans and bettors out there that have really no idea what you said, to be honest with you. So how can we maybe just give them a top line version of what they need to know about xERA?
So basically what it does is it takes the ERA scale and incorporates the stuff we talked about in FiP, which is walks and strikeouts are weighted heavily. But it takes another layer in addition, which is batted ball quality. And that's basically the big difference. That was only basically possible starting in like 2015 or so, once StatCast became public. And thanks to StatCast, we know basically with launch angle and velocity how much damage a batted ball should do, basically.
So would I be correct in saying that fielding independent pitching FiP does not take into account how hard a ball was hit in terms of launch angle and velocity, but xERA is adding that into the equation?
Yeah, so like unless that baseball goes out of the stadium, FiP is just going to ignore it because we know batted balls are very random, but batted balls in general are random. But for example, say a hitter squares up a baseball perfectly and hits a line drive. We also know that's very good, right? Everyone's known that forever. And we also know a weakly hit grounder is not good, right? So while we know that, we didn't know, or we didn't have really a way to quantify that until StatCast gave us the data on every batted ball.
Gotcha. So with that being said, am I correct in assuming or incorrect in assuming that xERA is a more detailed, important statistic to you than FiP is?
I would say it's probably a little better because it does add that extra layer. But I'm always like considering them both and looking at a lot of different stats. Honestly, there's a lot of great pitching ERA scale stats and non-ERA scale stats, like just simple, strikeout rate. All this stuff is very important, and I'm always looking at all of it. But xERA is a really new and exciting statistic that really does a good job of capturing an extra layer of baseball. I mean, at the same time, we do have to remember pitchers still don't have a lot of control over the baseball once it meets the bat. So while launch angle and exit velocity are really helpful in general, we can't put a ton of weight on it at the same time. So it's good to look at different stuff.
One of the big questions I want us to always ask in these videos, in case a casual fan or somebody who's wanting to get more into baseball betting is watching, the scale, right? The context of the numbers when we see an xERA next to a player's name. The traditional old school stats we all understand with earned run average and batting average and on base percentage. But give us an idea here of the scale. What is bad for xERA? What is average and what is good?
So that's one of the things that makes xERA so awesome, is that it's so easy to compare to ERA, which almost everybody understands, right? xERA, it's on the same scale. So something like 3 is very good. Something like 4 is okay. And then once you start climbing toward 5, the pitcher is not doing a good job of preventing runs, essentially. And one thing we always have to remember with stuff like this, it's much easier for, like, say, an ERA to be very low, like around 2. This is a lot easier to do because of the amount of luck that goes into ERA. When you're talking about something like xERA and FiP and these sorts of numbers, these are going to be crunched more towards the middle. There's not going to be, and same on the high side. You can get very unlucky and have an ERA of 7, but usually a player like that is going to have ERA estimators like xERA are going to have them closer to like 5, right? So we always have to remember the high end and the low end is going to get crunched towards the middle, because outliers are not as easy when you start incorporating stats that regress things like more to the mean, I guess, than ERA, which involves a lot of luck.
For sure. And along those lines, if you look at the 2021 leaders in xERA in Major League Baseball, you'll see the usual suspects, right? Because when we see the awards market in baseball and the writers starting to look more and more at advanced statistics when they're going to vote for these awards, you see some of these metrics pop out, and the leaders in these metrics pop out in the voting. Number 1 was Corbin Burns, Cy Young winner. Zach Wheeler, number 2, Cy Young runner-up or in the mix for that award. Number 3, Max Scherzer. Number 4, Walker Buehler. So the usual suspects from what you would expect. But to your point, if you look at, guys that are more in the middle of the pack, this is maybe where this stat becomes a little bit more useful, right? There are often times where we find pitchers with, a 4.5 ERA early in the season, somewhere there, and they might have a much lower xERA, and that might be a guy who the market hasn't adjusted to yet. You might get a good price on him. Or the opposite side, you might see somebody in the early going who has a really low ERA, but his xERA might be indicating otherwise, and that might be a time where you want to bet on the other team to win a game. Are these kind of like hypothetical situations that you've come across when you're looking at slates during the season?
Yeah, definitely. And one thing to always keep in mind is, we should be looking at previous years to see if these metrics are missing something about the player. Even more advanced metrics are gonna miss some things about some of these players. Like the example I used in my article about this, Julio Urias. He's consistently running an ERA lower than all of his estimators. So these metrics are missing that he has a true talent for inducing weak contact. And that's where something like xERA is going to do a better job estimating his true talent level. And if you're just judging him off even his FiP and these other metrics, you're going to be underrating him.
Yeah, I'm looking at this here in your article on thelines.com. He had a FiP and an xFiP of 3.32 and 4.09 versus his ERA of 3.09. So yeah, I mean, these advanced stats come in handy to give you a much better, brighter picture of what's actually going on with these players. Outside of handicapping sides or maybe totals or props in the futures market, what's maybe a past example where you've looked at xERA for, I don't know, maybe Cy Young market, or if there's a pitcher in the rookie of the year mix? That doesn't happen very often, but I guess maybe Cy Young's the better question there.
So I would say in general, it's probably less useful for something like that than something like FiP, just because of the fact that like FiP's been around since the early 2000s, and it's been a slow process, but more and more so becoming more ingrained into the baseball lexicon of even like your more traditional writers who are probably voting on some of these awards, right? I think xERA is new enough, like having only been around since I think like 2016 or something. I don't think it's quite there as far as like the mainstream acceptance goes. So I think probably more of a tool that you want to yourself use to evaluate the pitcher. And maybe it's something you use in the preseason. I wouldn't use it during the season for awards markets just because I wouldn't expect most voters to be like super cognizant of it.
Yeah, again, always a great thing to remember when you're looking to bet on awards. Essentially, there is a human element here. You can look at stats all you want, but if the voters aren't looking at those stats, it really doesn't matter, like Mo just said. So you're handicapping the humans here just as much as you are the talent at times. So, Mo, any final thoughts here on xERA before we wrap up?
Just always remember that it's a backwards looking metric. It can give you an idea of a pitcher who is underperforming or overperforming so far, but it's not necessarily a guarantee of what's going to happen going forward. So just keep that in mind. And then always also use multiple years of data if you can, because they might just be allowing too many hard struck batted balls, but maybe that's just an anomaly for this year. We don't know if that's something that's a multi-year pattern and something we should be expecting going forward without those multiple years of data.
Fantastic advice, Mo. Really appreciate it. To check out Mo Nuwara's work, you can find it at thelines.com. He's breaking down several baseball metrics heading into the season. You can use throughout the season as well. If you found this useful, hit the subscribe button, hit that like button. Let us know in the comments what you think of xERA and these other baseball metrics and how you are applying it to your handicapping for the 2022 season and maybe even beyond. Hey, we're trying to make these evergreen videos, so maybe you're finding this in a future season as well and want to use it there. So for Mo Nuwara, I'm Steven Andrus. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.